Hi, Pascal. Good evening.
Hi, Mr. Asotie. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm okay. How about you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm sorry we didn't get the opportunity to speak before today. Um,
Okay.
I just
It's all
uh,
right. I understand you are quite busy.
yeah, the struggle is real. Okay. So I just want to confirm because I have like a post class task. So that can be given for them to submit afterwards, Abby. The um the policy
Okay.
formulation aspects. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. The
Yeah.
one you posted on the Google
No,
Classroom, right?
no. The workshop, drafting a
Sorry.
policy briefing.
Hold on. Let me open it. But I'll be sure. You sent
Reading
two
materials.
yes. Is it there?
Yes, I sent the UN C I sent the UNCRPD
CRPD and
and
the
then the
EU.
EU.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So where will I see the tax? Is it in
No, I'm
the sorry?
asking you how it will be done.
Okay, okay. I think they're about to start joining. So
Okay.
is this your notebook? There's a notebook that's
No,
still
that's
open.
fine.
Not yours. Yeah.
I don't use I don't use the missing note to the
Okay.
best of my knowledge. Am I sharing my screen or will you be sharing for me?
Which one do you want?
You can share. You know how to follow, Abby.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Um, We're going to start in a few minutes time. Let's say by 6:06. So I'll just give 3 more minutes before we get started immediately. So please, can you go to our WhatsApp group and post a reminder on the group? We tell those that are yet to join the meeting that the section has already started. I can see Rebecca is here, Benjamin is here. So please go to our WhatsApp group and post a reminder on the group so that those that are yet to join us will do so immediately. Okay, it's time. First of all, good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. If you can hear me and you can see me, if you want to type one in the chat room. If you can hear me, you can see me, type one in the chat room. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a new week, a new section of the Neurodiversity Awareness Fellowship. Yes, it's been a very, very wonderful ride, a very wonderful journey. And I'm sure that all of us are excited for today's section already. So if you can hear me, you can see me, you can hear me, type one in the chat room. Okay, okay. Some of us are not yet here in the meeting. So I want those of us that are here, if you have not posted a reminder on the WhatsApp group, just take 5 seconds and do that for me, please, so that we can have lots of persons here in the meeting because today's section is going to be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Today we are going to be diving into the legal aspect and the policy advocacy aspect of neurodiversity. So to be very, very interesting. So I want those of us that are here in the meeting now, go to the WhatsApp group, post a reminder so that the person that are yet to join, they can join in immediately. You don't want to miss today's section for anything. You don't want to miss it for anything. Right? Okay. As we are posting the reminder on the WhatsApp group, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our facilitator for this evening. Yes, I'm sure that most of us must have seen the flyer when it was posted yesterday. Most of us have already interacted with her on the Google Classroom. Yes, I'm sure of that. But then I want you guys to understand something, that she's she's somebody that I respect so much, and she has lots of experience in the legal sector, working as a senior associate in one of the best legal firms in Nigeria. So we are so lucky that she could be able to make out just time for us, because she's a very busy person. Okay. And for the fact that she's here and some of us are not here yet, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Right? Now, she's an active member of the Nigerian Bar Association and the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, UK Nigerian branch. Now, she's going to be giving us insights, giving us how to approach the legal and the policy advocacy of neurodiversity. So I want us with your favorite emoji. With your favorite emoji. Okay? I want to see your favorite emoji as I make welcome our facilitator for this evening. I want to see your favorite emoji. Yes. Yes, I want to see your favorite emoji. As I make welcome our facilitator for today's section, Mrs. Olubunmi Asotie. Yes. You're welcome, ma'am. The floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascal, and good evening to everyone in this class. It's a privilege to be here, and I'm happy to be joining you for this session. So, sorry, just give me a second. I'm trying to pull up the document. All right. So I'm happy to be joining you for this session. My name is Olubunmi Asotie. I think Pascal has already gone through my profile. Essentially, I'm a lawyer. I'm qualified. I'm practicing in Nigeria. And I'll be taking us on the topic legal and policy frameworks on neurodiversity. Um, yes, so ahead of the class, I had shared a, a couple of documents, so we'll get to that anyway. So by way of introduction, I'm a senior associate with Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors. I'm also the team lead of the secretarial practice area. Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors is affiliated with Punuka Foundation, as you may have figured out. The firm is a top tier law firm. It's a rich and diverse workforce, having 10 partners and over 30 lawyers. We are ranked as a leading firm in Nigeria by top international legal directories. We have 3 offices in Nigeria with connections to top law firms across the globe. We're a full service firm with over 16 practice areas across 12 sectors of the economy. We are client-centric, service-oriented firm with a vision to become a leading global law firm working with you for solutions. So that is who we are. Pascal, next slide, please. All right, so we'll skip my profile as I think that has been shared. So to the table of contents, today we are talking about legal and policy framework on neurodiversity. So we'll have an introduction. We'll look at the global framework, resting essentially on the UN framework. We'll also look at some of the regional frameworks. We'll look at some corporate frameworks. Then we'll look at policy gaps in Anglophone West Africa, and then we'll go on to the workshop. I think it will be after today anyway. So we'll have the workshop. So with that, we'll dive right into the introduction. So essentially, we're going to examine um, what the legal and policy frameworks are. So by way of introduction, neurodiversity is the idea that differences in how people think, how they learn and process information are natural variations of the human brains and not necessarily defects to a fix. So the idea is that everybody doesn't come with their brains wired the same way. And so if people are a bit different from you, is not necessarily because there's something wrong with them, but it's just that they are different in a certain way. And then neurodiversity, as we know already, covers a range of neurological differences, so it will cover autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette syndrome, and these people having these conditions or these differences are described as neurodivergent, while those that do not have it are referred to as being neurotypical people. So I think that's just a brief introduction. So we go on to the global framework on neurodiversity, and the first we'll be looking at is the International Human Rights Framework. I shared the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, 2008, the UNCRPD. And essentially, the purpose of the framework, that's the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, is to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. That's what Article 1 of the Convention provides for. Essentially, what it's saying is that every right that you enjoy, that everyone enjoy as human beings, as citizens of a particular nation, or wherever it is that they find themselves, people, that are neurodiverse are also entitled to benefit from those rights. So think of all the fundamental rights that the right to life, the right to dignity of a human person, very, very important, the right to freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, the right to privacy, and the rest like that, the right to live and move anywhere that they choose to. Every of all those rights that are considered human rights are also applicable to neurodiverse people because they are also human beings. So essentially, the CRPD defines persons with disabilities to include people who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society or on an equal basis with others. So because of certain conditions or impairment, they might not be able to interact, with the society the way other people will. So, for example, where someone is visually impaired, you don't expect that that kind of person would easily be able to interact with, say, for example, the transportation system, especially in Nigeria, and the rest like that. So that's just trying to explain what definition of a person with disabilities. And the CRPD as a UN framework, it serves as a major catalyst in the global disability rights movement, because the UN always takes the lead most times, in shaping the policy framework on topical issues. And this is one thing that they have done with the CRPD. So it helps to shape the global perception on disability rights, enabling a shift from viewing them as objects of charity, which is something that is very common, unfortunately, in Nigeria and I dare say in Africa. When someone is experiencing some sort of impairment, they are viewed as objects of charity or people that, oh, they need medical treatment, or you just sort of abandon them on one side instead of giving them the protection, social protection, and according them the full rights and opportunities as full and equal members of society. So we look at some of the key principles of the CRPD, and these are outlined in Article 3. And the first is respect for inherent dignity, individual autonomy, including the freedom to make their own choices and independence of persons. So I already mentioned in the course of highlighting some of the fundamental rights that one fundamental right that is available to the average citizen is the right to dignity of the person. So this is one of the key principles that is also embedded in the CRPD. respect for their inherent dignity, their individual autonomy. So they should be allowed to make their own choices, make their choices, decide what they want to do or what they will not want to do, have the same options presented to them to make a decision and have their independence as human beings. Another principle is non-discrimination. So they should not be discriminated against on basis of whatever impairments that they have. Also, full and effective participation and inclusion in society. And this is very, very important because there is most times in our part of the world not sufficient provision or sufficient accommodation for their effective participation and inclusion in society. So this means, provision for them, to use public spaces, to access public buildings, for example. You see a lot of public buildings that do not have ramps. You see even public libraries, that do not have books, in braille. You see, even for example, the voting process, is there an accommodation for people that are impaired to be able to vote? So those things are some of the things that are embedded in the CRPD. Respect for difference and acceptance of persons with disabilities as part of human diversity and humanity. Equality of opportunity. This is also a key issue. Accessibility, equality between men and women, and respect for the evolving capacities of children with disabilities and their respect, the right of these children, to preserve their identities. So these are some of the key principles that are embedded in the CRPD. And then it goes on to make provision, for state parties to the convention. And this is provided for in Article 4, which is number one, to adopt all appropriate legislative, administrative, and other measures for the implementation of the rights that are recognized in the convention. So this means that once a state has adopted the convention, they have to then make domestic laws, administrative and other measures. So not just making the laws, but also making the necessary provisions to effect the laws, to implement the laws essentially, to implement the laws, to recognize all those rights and make reasonable accommodation for these people. Also to take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to modify or abolish existing laws or regulations, customs, and practices that constitute discrimination against persons with disabilities. I already talked about the fact that in some instances, which is a lot in this side of the world, they are considered people of charity. So, in fact, there's almost a natural tendency that once people see people that are maybe visually impaired or otherwise challenged, they want to give them money. They are objects of pity. You don't even want to know. Maybe the person that is coming to meet you is looking for a job. People are more likely to just treat them like, you know, um, I don't want to say an inconvenience, but like a necessary inconvenience. So what the convention expects is that state parties that are domesticating the convention must take measures to abolish anti equal practices, customs and practices, because sometimes not everything is even legislation. Sometimes it's just the custom, is the negative culture and discriminatory thoughts that are attached with some of these things. And the next is to take into account the protection and promotion of the human rights of persons with disabilities in all policies and programs. So when the government is making plans, they are rolling out all manner of policies in education, social change policies and the rest like that. There has to be constant consideration of the interest and protection of persons with disabilities, to refrain from engaging in any act or practice that is inconsistent with the convention, and ensure that public authorities and institutions act in conformity with the convention and take all appropriate steps to eliminate discrimination on the basis of disability by any person, organization, or private enterprise. So these are just some of there's quite a lot, but these are some of the responsibilities of state parties that are adopting the convention. So because of time, I'll just move on and just round up on CRPD. So Article 27 recognizes the rights of persons with disabilities to work on an equal basis with others. And this includes the right to the opportunity to gain a living by work fully chosen, or accepted in labor market. Essentially, what it means is that they are also entitled to enter the labor market and compete favorably, with others. And you shouldn't discriminate against them and say, oh, because they have this challenge, they can't do certain work or they can't earn on an equal basis with others. So it's equal right to equal opportunity to do work that they chose, and be accepted in the labor market. And the work environment has to be open, inclusive, and accessible to persons with disabilities. So you can't expect a person with disability, for example, now, excuse me, maybe like say for example, visual or maybe mobility challenges, and then you want them to get into a high-rise building, and then there's no provision for ramps and lifts. Um, that would be antithetical to the objectives of the convention. So state parties are expected to safeguard and promote the realization of the right to work, including for those who acquire a disability in the course of employment, by making sure that necessary steps are taken. So that is it on the global framework on neurodiversity. So now we move on to corporate neurodiversity programs. And this is actually very, very, for me, in the course of doing research, and working on the paper, is something that really, really excited and gladdened me, that we have gone beyond just having governments and global social institutions making the framework. And these things are actually being adopted by corporate entities, businesses, global businesses, to make sure that there is inclusion. It's easy to say I'm an equal opportunity employer, without actually making adequate provisions for equal opportunity employment. So, but what we have seen so far is that certain international organizations have actually created their own neurodiversity programs that are active up and running globally across their businesses globally. So we'll just look at some of them. So the first is the IBM Neurodiversity Advancements Initiative. The IBM um, the IBM Neurodiversity Advancement Initiative. So this is essentially the neurodiversity policy at IBM, and it's a workplace program designed to support employees whose brains work differently. We already talked about it in the beginning, that sometimes it's not about them being defective. They are wired differently from the neurotypical people, and so IBM created this initiative to accommodate people with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and other neurological differences. And the goal of the initiative is to create a work environment where these employees feel comfortable being themselves and they are given the support needed to succeed. We already said that they are not defective, they are not to be fixed, they are just different. And so all they need is the right environment that works for them, and sometimes some of the things they need are as little as having just a quiet environment, a well-structured environment, having the lighting and other things in place, and they are fine. And they are even able to perform more optimally than the so-called quote unquote regular people. So the initiative focuses on three main ideas: awareness, acceptance, and advancement. So the first, that is the awareness idea, essentially educates employees about neurodiversity so that people understand what it means and how different individuals may think and work differently. So that's creating awareness among their own other employees. And then the second is acceptance. They promote acceptance by encouraging inclusive behavior and ensuring neurodivergent employees feel valued and supported in the workplace. So everybody, it's not like they are kept um isolated, so they ensure that there is inclusive responsibilities, there is inclusive activities that help them feel okay, we are together, nothing is wrong with me, and the rest like that. And then the third part of the program focuses on advancement by helping neurodivergent employees grow in their careers, participate fully in meetings and projects, and access opportunities for development. So there's conscious effort, and overall this policy aims to make the workplace more inclusive by recognizing that people think and work differently and supporting those differences, thereby bringing out their well-being, promoting their well-being, and enabling them to be more innovative at work. Next is SAP's Autism at Work program. So the SAP's neurodiversity policy is known as the Autism at Work program, and it's a workplace initiative designed to recruit, support, and develop individuals with autism and other neurological differences, while also improving innovation within the company. So essentially, for them, that is at SAP, it's about changing how they view and hire talents. So they understand that people with autism, for example, they are highly skilled, but they are often overlooked due to the traditional hiring process. They might not be able to go through the usual or just put the advert on LinkedIn, take their CVs, use software to sift out, invite some people for interview and the rest like that. They might not be able to go through because that's like the traditional process that is already wired towards a certain type of people, So they introduce special recruitment methods to focus more on the person's abilities than standard interviews. So in this situation now, they might be having like a hands-on interview to say, okay, you say you can do this, practice this, do this, and let's see what the outcome will be. Instead of submit your CV, rewrite written test, come for oral interview and the rest. And then when they are hired, they provide a strong support system for them. So they give them mentors and job coaches. There are trainings on with other team members on how to work effectively with neurodivergent colleagues, and then they adapt the workplace to reduce stress, such as sensory friendly workspaces. And I mentioned this. So it's not just about inclusion for SAP, it's about value and innovation. Like I mentioned earlier, you'll find that neurodivergent employees, they bring unique strengths. Some of them, they are very, very focused, attention to detail. What other people miss, you'll find it. They are also good at identifying patterns in data, and they have high levels of focus and problem solving skills. So the patience the patience that the neurotypical people may not have, you find out that autistic people, they have it, and they're able to identify whatever is looking at, they can't see, they can identify patterns in data. So it actually works also well for the employer because they gain best value from these people. Next is Microsoft's neurodiversity program, and this focuses on changing traditional hiring and workplace practices to better recognize and support diverse talents. So it started by hiring early career engineers and has expanded across the company. So they were focusing on engineers before, AI as well and all those things, but they've expanded to include other areas of their business, so their finance department, their marketing, customer support, and the rest like that. So it's not just the engineering or the IT part that they are hiring, doing diversity hiring for essentially. So the approach in Microsoft is to hire based on skills rather than the conventional interview programs. Obviously, this is similar to the SAP approach also. And then they provide specialized training also so that neurodivergent employees can succeed in the workplace. And then they also have ongoing support and career development opportunities for them so that they're able to grow within the organization. And then they create other initiatives like neurodiversity at work, employer roundtable to promote inclusive hiring practices globally. So essentially for Microsoft, neurodiversity policy is about removing barriers, supporting individual strengths, and creating an inclusive workplace where everyone can contribute and thrive. So now we move on to looking at key principles and similarities in the global neurodiversity policies. So looking at the international laws, regional frameworks, corporate initiatives like the ones we have just looked at, certain common ideas, flow through all these policies, conventions, and the rest like that. And so number one of this is fair treatment, essentially non-discrimination. So all the policies that we have looked at so far, they agree that people with neurological differences should not be treated unfairly in terms of access to education, employment, or daily life just because their brains work differently. Second is equal opportunities. They should have access to the same jobs, the same education and service as everyone else without unnecessary barriers. Because these barriers, they can be they can just what's the word now, severely hamper their opportunities, and their chances of living a good life, or gaining satisfaction in life. I remember during my undergraduate days, there was a lady that was visually impaired and she attended my fellowship, and every time I kept on wondering how exactly was she coping, and she had someone who would bring her to fellowship, and hold her. You know how Nigeria can be, it's government school for that matter. So the land size is massive, the buildings, the layout is not, I can't say any form of organization to it, and the rest like that. And then the topology. So for you not to see, even we where they see, we are falling down, we fall, we trip, we bump into things and the rest like that, just because everything is never properly organized. So I was always worried how she was doing it. And by the time she was going to graduate, She came to share a testimony, and she talked about how apparently she wasn't born blind, some sort of illness, and how when it was time to go to school, her parents discouraged her because obviously they couldn't see how she was going to do it. Oh, there's no provision for special facilities, in government institutions, or should I say most government institutions, especially tertiary ones, and the rest like that. But she insisted that she was going to go, and on her first trip to the school, she met someone on the bus, and that person became her friend. So that was the person I always saw and holding her to church programs and the rest. I honestly thought the lady was a caregiver. Apparently, she was also a student, and they were friends. And all she had to do was, at the time, obviously, it was, I'm not sure, did we have smartphones? Some 14 years ago. I can't remember. These phones were not this smart anyway, So she had a recorder. So she go to class, she record. And then for exams, I think she was doing like oral exams. So, but not everybody is going to be that, I don't want to say lucky. Not everyone's going to be that favored that you will see a friend that will take it upon herself for 4 years to be taking you up and down school, taking you to lecture, taking you to church. Like she lived a very good life. She was in a choir. She lived like a good life. But the point I'm trying to make is that the system did not have provision for her. The system did not make any accommodation for her. And there are so many more people like her who are unable to access tertiary education, not because they don't want to, not because they don't even have the financial resources to pay their fees, but because the structure of the accommodation is not there. And these are some of the themes that these policies are addressing. Support and adjustment. So organizations are expected to make reasonable changes, flexible work arrangements, assistive tools, different teaching methods to help them succeed. So you cannot tell someone that is neurodivergent that they must do it the conventional ways at all times. No. So you have to give flexibility. So if, for example, the workplace does not have as much accommodation they need, then you allow them work remotely where they've probably set up their own spaces to be conducive to them, and the rest like that. Inclusive environments, there's also a strong focus on creating workplaces and schools that accept and support differences rather than expecting everybody to think and behave the same way. And finally, they focus on strengths, not just challenges. So we already talked about their unique skills, their creativity, their attention to detail, their problem solving abilities that can benefit their classmates, that can benefit their employers. There's also the focus on awareness and training. Employers, teachers, and public are encouraged to learn about neurodiversity so that they can better understand and support these people. Collaboration and support systems, and continuous review and improvement. So these are some of the central themes that run across all the policies that we've looked at. So with that, we go on to the regional frameworks. We go on to the regional frameworks. Yes. So we look at the EU's disability rights strategy, the European Union disability rights strategy. This is a 10-year disability strategy by the EU aimed at improving the quality of life of people with disabilities and ensuring that they are fully included in society. And essentially, the aim is to make sure that people with disabilities can live independently. They don't have to, excuse me, they don't have to live um, the whole of their life in homes and the rest like that. And that's why when you go to advanced society, you see people, neurodiverse people and people with disabilities, they live like no auntie, no uncle, no anybody. They live, they organize their life. The systems work. They know how many steps they need to take to get to the bus stop. They know what time the bus will arrive. They know where their seats are on the bus, and the rest like that. Because there's a structure that allows them to live independently. They can go grocery shopping and do things for themselves. So that's the goal of the EU strategy, to ensure that they can live independently, enjoy equal rights, and participate fully in everyday life, just like everybody else. So it recognizes that people with disabilities still face barriers, honestly, in areas such as employment, education, healthcare, transportation, and access to public spaces. And the goal of the strategy is to remove those obstacles. So um, it focuses on several key areas, really. Number one, equal rights and protection from discrimination to ensure that they are treated fairly in every aspect. So the fact that the person has a disability is not reason why they should not get the job, as long as they are competent enough to do it. Independent living and supporting them to make choices about where and how to live rather than being limited by their condition. Accessibility, improving access to building, transport, digital services, and public facilities so they can be used by everyone. Employment and education, creating more opportunities for people with disabilities to go to school, gain skills, and find meaningful jobs. And then participation in society, encouraging involvement in community life, politics, and decision making process. And I'll just touch on the importance of these things, especially for we that we are in this part of the world, and on reference to this part of the world, I'm focusing more on Nigeria, which obviously I'm based in and I have more experience in. And I already talked about the fact that we do not have the systems and the structure, for them to have equal rights, for example, because even though nobody is going about killing people with disabilities or something, um, they are not able to have the fullest expression. For example, I talked about voting. I talked about voting. Where is the structure for people with disabilities or neurodiverse people to vote? I'm not aware of any in Nigeria. Independent living, same thing, because even the BRT, for example, in places like Lagos, it does not work. It doesn't work with time. You don't know if it's going to come, and the rest like that. Accessibility, even public buildings do not have ramps, do not have lifts, do not have um, digital services and the rest like that. Employment and education. So these things are very, very important. So the strategy also promotes cooperation among European countries, encouraging them to improve their national systems and adopt inclusive policies. So and then it introduces practical measures such as the European Disability Card to make it easy for people with disabilities to access services and move freely across different countries. And I think this is just a brilliant initiative and a deliberate commitment to protecting and promoting the rights of people with disabilities and neurodiverse people. And so I think when we get to Nigeria and Africa, I'll talk more on that. Charter on Fundamental Rights of the European Union, it's 2000. I'm sorry, please, I would just like to confirm that everybody can still hear me and see me, although I can see myself and I think I can hear myself when I see Pascal's picture smiling at me. But let's just be sure that we're all on the same page. Can you see and hear
Yeah,
me?
loud and clear. We can hear you.
Yes, yes, we can
Oh,
see
all
and
right.
can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union is a key document that sets out the basic rights and freedom of people living in the EU, including political, social, and economic rights. And it plays a role in protecting neurodivergent individuals as it clearly prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability and promotes inclusion in society and the workplace. Article 21 of the Charter on non-discrimination states that no one shall be treated unfairly because of disability, age, race, gender, religion, da 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 da. I'm sure if you cast your mind back, it's very familiar with our own Nigerian constitution, the chapter on fundamental rights. It also prohibits discrimination based on nationality within the scope of the EU law. But beyond non-discrimination, it encourages a more inclusive society by supporting equal access to employment and education, fair treatment in social and economic life, and respect for human dignity and diversity. The Charter ensures that everyone, including people with disabilities or neurological differences, are treated fairly, protected from discrimination, and are given equal opportunities to participate in society. There's also the Council of Europe Disability Strategy 2017 to 2023, and this was developed to improve the lives of people with disability and ensure full inclusion in society. It focuses on implementing the UNCRPD through five priority areas: awareness raising, accessibility, equal recognition before the law, freedom from exploitation, violence, and abuse. You know, so now we look at cross-cutting issues. So in addition, the strategy highlights important themes that should be considered in all policies: participation, cooperation, and coordination, involving people with disabilities in decisions that affect them. So, and this is very critical because what seems to happen is people without disabilities, let me put it that way, are the ones that sit and decide, oh, we should have a policy for people with disabilities, we should have a policy to protect neurodivergent individuals, which is good. However, these people that we are talking about are also human beings with all the full rights of the law, and so they are entitled to participate, because you cannot be more how they say, there's a proverb, is the person that is wearing the shoe that knows how it pinches them. You can look at someone with disability or a neurodivergent person and decide that, oh, this person is facing this challenge, this person is facing employment opportunities challenge, fair treatment challenge, and rest. Yes. However, that person should have a say to be able to give you a full insight to exactly what they face, and that would then help you in preparing a fit for purpose solution. So that's one of the major issues that the strategy focuses on. Second, universal design and reasonable accommodation. So it focuses on creating environments that work for everyone and making necessary adjustments where needed. Third, gender equality, recognizing that disability can affect men and women differently. you know. Four, multiple discrimination. So where individuals face more than one form of discrimination. Say, for example, someone that is physically challenged, and then the person is also pregnant, and obviously the person is a woman. So the person is likely to be discriminated on basis of disability, discriminated on basis of gender as a woman, discriminated on basis of being pregnant. So that's just an example of multiple discrimination. We've had so many stories of women losing jobs or losing employment opportunities because they were pregnant. Same thing with people that suffer from disability. They may have even scaled through certain interview process or recruitment process, and maybe they tell them, oh, come in physically, and then once they see them, you come up with one story as to why the employment, the opportunity will no longer be given to them. So it does happen. Then education and training, promoting learning opportunities and awareness at all levels. So even though the strategy has ended obviously since 2023, the principles continue to influence disability and inclusion process across Europe, in line with international standards like the UN CRPD. We also have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights 1981. And for me, quite unfortunately, I don't think that we in Africa have a very specific policy. In terms of regional policies, we've seen the EU policy, and you can see that it is very specific to neurodiverse people and people with disability. But this one is just the African Charter on everybody's rights, in my opinion. Anyway, it does have provision for disability, but I just feel like we have the opportunity to develop a more holistic framework specifically for neurodiverse and um, um, disabled persons. So the African Charter on Human and People's Rights is a key regional human rights instrument in Africa that sets out the fundamental rights, freedoms, and duties of individuals across African states. And the aim is to promote dignity, equality, and justice while ensuring that everyone can participate meaningfully in society. And then in relation to people with disability, it recognizes the need for special protection and inclusive policies. Articulating provides that aged persons and persons with disabilities are entitled to specific measures of protection that reflect their physical and social needs, you know. And also there's also a provision in Article 28 for a broader social responsibility, requiring individuals to respect one another, non-discrimination, and the rest of that. Yeah. So that's it. Then we also have the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of persons with disabilities. So this is the protocol that follows the African Charter. Um, and essentially it was adopted in January 2018 to implement the CRPD. So we already talked about the CRPD and the implementation frameworks, and one of it was that they have to, adopt local laws. So this is the African Charter trying to do that on the regional level. So in simple terms, it takes into account the real life challenges faced by persons with disabilities in Africa, including groups that may be overlooked globally, such as persons with albinism. So the main goal of the protocol is to ensure that persons with disabilities enjoy equal rights and opportunities, are treated with dignity and respect, and have full access to education, healthcare, employment, and other essential services. And also encourages African countries to review and align their national laws and policies to ensure inclusion, accessibility, and equal opportunities for all citizens. In summary, it provides a stronger legal framework. I think one of the key uh, benefits, for like I mentioned, people that easily can be overlooked, people with albinism. And to be honest, until I became an adult, I actually did not ever think or know that albinism was a disability. You know. So it's because the what's it called, the enlightenment, educating people is not there really. So I just feel, oh, they just need glasses, until recently, not recently, but like adulthood really. So it's something that just shows you the huge gap that is still on the continent when it comes to neurodiversity and disability really. And for some of us growing up, the older ones amongst us, you will know that, growing up, there were really no facilities, and it was really bad because they were like the rejects of the family. You would have families that have people with neurodiverse conditions or even physical disabilities, and they won't be sent to school. They'll be at home, they'll be given leftovers to eat, treated like slaves, treated like second class citizens, and the rest like that, because they didn't know what to do essentially. There was no enlightenment, there were no facilities. So with these policies, there is improvement. And at least one of it is what the Punuka Foundation is doing with its child care center, for example. In Nigeria, um, there are a number of policies. I think the topmost one, I'm not sure if it's on my slide, and that would be an omission. I think I started with the Child Rights Act, but I will actually want to focus on the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Protection and Prohibition Act, the 2018, and then there's the National Policy on Inclusive Education, 2017, that was revised in 2023. Essentially, it aims to foster inclusion in education, healthcare, and employment. And these frameworks, alongside the NCDs, aim to reduce systemic barriers through implementation. You know, implementation is still limited, really. I'm not quite sure if we've seen drastic improvement in terms of reasonable accommodation for their education, their healthcare, and employment. Really, I'm not going to say I have seen. I think that largely what we have are private initiatives, for example, what the Punuka Foundation is doing. Also, I would give shout out to organizations like Chicken Republic. I don't know if anybody has experienced in any of their outlets, but they actually, I believe they have a policy, but I know for a fact that they actually intentionally recruit people that suffer from um, 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 different disabilities. Let me put it that way. So I've been in an outlet and I've had, I think one or two persons also confirmed to me where I was attended to by someone, who couldn't speak, and it was so I was blown away because there was no they were treated normally, So I had gone on speaking. I was just wondering why the lady she was looking around apparently for a piece of paper, and then she wrote, and then I figured it out. And we ordered, and it was such a seamless um um experience, and I was very impressed. So for Nigeria, despite the Discrimination Against Persons with Disability Prohibition Act, really, implementation has been a huge problem. I talked about my experience with the person that I knew in school. Um, as recently as yesterday, I still saw someone. I went to Unilag for something, and I still saw someone, with a disability. They do have them. I think they have Unilag that is have maybe like a better structure, really, in terms of accommodating them. I don't know because I seem to see like more people, and the person seemed to be well familiar with the environment. He even folded his cane. I was impressed. So but most of the initiatives seem to be privately led, privately promoted, organizations, private institutions, just doing things to accommodate people. And then even though there's an act that says, oh, there's no discrimination against persons with disabilities, um, I've never heard of any enforcement action. There's been no enforcement action, there's no enforcement structure. I'm not quite sure who even enforces the act. So those are some of the issues. Then also we have the Child Rights Act 2003, and essentially it is to protect the rights, welfare, and development of every child. Children are defined as anyone at the age of 18. And essentially the act requires that children be treated with dignity, protected from harm, given the opportunity to grow, learn, and live safely, and it places responsibility on parents and guardians and the government to provide proper care um, and protection. The key principle of the Child Rights Act is that um, the best interest of the child must come first in every decision that affects them. And some of the rights include education and healthcare, access to dignity and protection, so they should not be abused, neglected, or suffer degrading treatment because of any form of either physical disability or neurodiverse condition. They are entitled to family life and development, so they should grow in safe and supportive environments. They are to be protected from exploitation, including child labor, trafficking, and harmful practices. And then the act makes it illegal to engage them in exploitative labor and trafficking, subject them to abuse, violence, or neglect, involve them in criminal activities or armed conflict, sorry, or force them into um, early marriage. There's also specific provision for special care for vulnerable children, including those with disabilities, and a child-friendly justice system focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment. And then government intervention where a child's welfare is at risk. But like we mentioned, the system still needs a lot of work. That's the truth. It still needs a lot of work. There's also a national policy on special needs education in Nigeria. um, it's a framework developed by the government to ensure that children and adults with disabilities or special needs have access to quality and inclusive education. And the policy is about making sure that no one is left out of education because of disability, and the rest like that. And then the key focus of the policy is inclusive education. So they should, be able to learn alongside other students in regular schools rather than being separated and the rest like that. And the objectives of the policy is to provide equal access to education for special persons with special needs, ensure early identification and support for children with disabilities, promote inclusive learning environments with appropriate teaching methods, prepare students not just academically but for life outside school, including skills for employment and independence. Yeah, so this is it. I know that there are facilities and the rest like that, but like we said, I'm not even sure the government structures and institutions would earn a pass mark if they were to be graded. So there are lots of facilities. I know the Punuka Foundation, there's the annual visit that we do to various homes and institutions where you have neurodiverse children or physically disabled children, and like the what's it called? The Methodist school at Ereko in Lagos Island. So they have it's a special school for neurodiverse children. Ibobi also has a special school. And then you have, for example, the Modupe Memorial. And really, when you visit those places, it's not really um, there's nothing much to write home about, So there's inadequate funding, inadequate facilities, and the rest like that. So even though yes, we have the policies, but the implementation framework is not being properly managed. So we look at common themes across the regional policies, and the first is equality and non-discrimination. I'll try to rush through now so that we can just round up as quickly as possible. So equality and non-discrimination. So all these policies that we have looked at, they emphasize that persons with disabilities should not face unfair treatment because of their disabilities. Also, there's emphasis on equal access to education, employment, public services, and political participation. So there's even no evidence that, for example, in Africa, in Nigeria particularly, that there is a special public program for employment for these people. It's almost as though they are leaving into the private sector's discretion. Meanwhile, government is supposed to take the lead. They are the ones that establish all these policies. Accessibility. So governments and organizations must remove barriers, physical, digital, or social, that prevent participation. Also, there's participation and inclusion. They must have a voice. Persons with disabilities must have a voice in decision making, including in policies, programs, and governance that affect them. We talked about this. Encouraging community involvement and inclusion in society, not isolation. Participation, okay, no. Employment and economic opportunities. So, importance of giving them meaningful work, fair pay, and career development. Protection from abuse and exploitation, support and reasonable accommodation. We talked about it. Data monitoring and accountability. So governments are encouraged to collect data, monitor progress, and hold themselves accountable. And I think this just sums up the issues that we have highlighted, and ensure that the policies are effective and they address real needs. So that's the question: are the policies effective? And they focus on specific groups. So the policies also highlights groups that face additional barriers. So women, children, older persons, people with albinism, and neurodivergent individuals, and ensure equity and tailor support for diverse experiences. And this is very important because you see, say for example, on the public transportation system, you have designated seats, for special specific groups, maybe for older people, for physically challenged people, and the rest like that. And you will see neurotypical people, they will sit down there. And when they even see the people that the seats are designated for, they may not even stand up because really nobody is enforcing it. There is no enlightenment, there is no education. And so people don't know how to act. So we look at the policy gaps, and I have touched on a lot of them. So we'll just quickly run through them. There are a lot of policy gaps, and the first is limited awareness and recognition. I just said earlier that for myself, up until adulthood, I did not know, I did not imagine that albinism was anything. It was, for as far as I was concerned, they're just differently colored. They may as well have been Caucasians for as far as I knew, So governments, institutions, and even the citizens often lack understanding of neurodivergent condition, leading to minimal public education or awareness campaigns. And this is a very big issue. As far as I'm concerned, forms the foundation of most of the problems that we encounter in terms of protecting, advocating for neurodiverse people and protecting their rights, and their benefits as human beings and as citizens. There is no understanding, there's no awareness, there's no education. I remember as a kid, at some point, the house we lived, our landlord had a relative who was physically okay. I'm not quite sure what her condition was, but it was some neurodiverse condition. Maybe she was autistic, and all that. And she was the best way I can say is that she was kept as a slave, And my sister and I used to be so curious as to what exactly was going on. I would be disturbing our mom. Why is this auntie? Because she was way older than us, And the way they would treat her, she was sitting on the floor. She goes to their house, she'd be on the floor, just like a dog in the corner. Because, and I feel it's because, by the way, they were not her parents, or her parents abandoned her. These people that took her in literally were treating her like a second class citizen because there was no understanding. They probably, things that could have been treated, there was no treatment. I don't even know what would have become of her by now. So there is very minimal education, minimal awareness campaigns on what is going on, how to treat them, even the special skills that they have that their friends, their loved ones, their employers can leverage on. Nobody knows about it because nobody is doing the enlightenment. Number two, inadequate educational support. So even though there are policies for special needs education and the rest of that, but implementation is whack. Pardon my French. So the schools often lack the resources, the trained teachers, or accommodation to support neurodivergent learners. There's a cultural stigma. So there's a stigma that, oh, something, maybe your ancestors did something, or the village deity caused your family, or the rest like that. So you see parents of neurodivergent children, trying to dissociate, hide them away, and the rest of that because of the shame and stigma, that are associated with some of these conditions. And this then discourages them from seeking help. So even things that could have been corrected, or even things that they could have received support to help them bloom, they'll go and hide the children because they don't want the neighbor. What will the Joneses say? Insufficient legal protection. Even though there are disability laws, I talked about the fact that there's no implementation. In terms of even institutional. Where do you go to report to where the rights of a neurodivergent person is breached? You know, I can almost imagine Nigeria if you go and tell them an autistic, they'll probably even laugh at you. So there's no structure to enforce it. Lack of inclusive workspaces. Work employment policies rarely consider neurodivergent employees' needs, leading to low workforce participation and missed opportunities. So for most of these people, they either have to find their own employment or create their own employment by maybe setting up businesses. Many of them are very skilled, so they just do lots of skilled work, and then they don't participate like in a corporate work environment because the policies totally do not consider their existence most times. And then limited early diagnosis and intervention programs. So very few programs exist for early identification of the neurodivergent conditions, and this delays access to support and accommodations. And I think I mentioned that earlier. So we go on to developing policy briefs as a reform tool. So for you to bring about reforms, one of the key elements is policies. And we have seen the implication, for example, the UN policy, how it has cascaded down, you know, triggering the AU policy and even local legislation in countries like Nigeria. So policies are very strong and effective to bring about the change, to bring about enlightenment, to secure state buy-in, government buy-in into what the issues are and resolution steps. So it does not just summarize the law, it identifies the policy problem. What is the issue? Locates it within a legal and institutional framework, analyzes why the current system is underperforming, and recommends feasible action. So a policy brief on neurodiversity would normally include or should include 5 elements: a defined problem statement, why neurodivergent learners remain excluded despite educational commitments, or why is there workplace anti-discrimination guarantees that have not produced accommodation practices. So these are some of the problem statements. You are saying, oh, you are having inclusive education commitment. However, neurodivergent learners are excluded because when they go to school, the teacher does not even know what ADHD is. The teacher has never heard of autism. The teacher does not know what dyslexia is. So how do they accommodate these people? So even though we are saying we are committed to inclusive education, but obviously there are still gaps. So that is you defining a problem statement. Next is a legal and policy background, identifying, you know, relevant treaty obligations. So Nigeria, for example, is a signatory to the UN convention, is a signatory to the African Charter, is a signatory to the policy on neurodiversity and the rest like that. So you situate that problem statement within the legal and policy background, identifying the relevant treaty obligations, the domestic statutes, agencies, and sectoral rules. And then have an evidence-based analysis explaining the gap between the law and reality. We already talked that there's the law in terms of the policies, but what is on ground? What is on ground? So that analysis has to be done. And then policy options that distinguish between minimal, moderate, and ambitious reform. So what is the extent of the reforms that you want to do? And then a set of recommendations that are legally grounded, institutionally specific, and budget conscious. So recommendations on policies need to be highly practical, such as issuing neurodiversity specific implementation guidelines under existing disability laws. So for example, for example, there was a time when Lagos State decided to, because of the pervasiveness of the issue of gender-based abuse and sexual-based abuse, especially against women, the government decided to focus on the issue. And so within the existing legal framework, in terms of the criminal law system, obviously abuse is criminal, sexual abuse is criminal, gender-based violence is criminal. But they then drill down on it and then they created like specialized courts. So in Lagos, for example, you have specialized courts on domestic and sexual abuse. So for that's all the courts deal with. And what happened is that trials and matters relating to domestic violence, sexual abuse, and I think there's also children included, they are fast tracked because that's all the judge is doing. So those matters come, they move faster than the other civil matters where you can still be in the preliminary stage in the first 2 years and takes you 5 to 7 years to go from filing your brief to getting judgment just at the high court. So those are some of the things that can be done in this policy framework review. So recommendations have to be very practical. Excuse me. Issuing neurodiversity specific implementation guidelines under the existing policies, training teachers, having labor inspectors, having judicial officers, public officers, and the rest like that. Also embedding inclusive education standards into curriculum and school inspection systems. So you already have maybe, for example, the people from Ministry of Education going around schools, checking the curriculum, checking the physical accommodations, checking the qualifications of the teachers and caregivers and the rest like that. So you should also embed inclusive education standard into this system so that when they are inspecting also, they check, okay, your educational system, is it inclusive of neurodiverse education requirements? Do you have accommodations for them? Where are their own facilities? Of course, they are part of the class, but how do you make time for them, their own special, anything that just accommodates them? So it's part of the benchmarks that you then rate along with other requirements. So next is creating compliant and ready channels that are accessible to neurodivergent persons and families, requiring disability commissions or councils to publish implementation benchmarks. Unfortunately, like I said, I'm not quite sure um they are really specialized commissions. What normally happens, they just merge most times, maybe like all this Ministry of Women and Social Development, they just carry everything together. So we don't really have specialized institutions, honestly. And that's part of the reasons why there's a problem. And even if it's merged among other ministry, there should be specialized departments that are really working on this thing. And then the policy brief should also distinguish between reforms that require legislative amendments and those that can be achieved administratively through regulations, protocols, budgeting decisions or ministerial guidelines. So not everything requires a new law to solve. Sometimes all you just need is to implement the law. So, administrative decisions. Are you creating new departments? Are you creating new enforcement, inspectory, supervision mechanisms? What provisions are you making in the budget for this? You are building schools, for example. Yes. So in this building the school, is there provision, for ramps? Is there provision for braille teaching? Is there provisions for people, who can't speak, who can see, who can hear? Is there provision for neurodiverse children, to also be able to learn, the same thing that their colleagues are learning? So sometimes it's not just about establishing new laws, it's just tweaking the existing systems and making sure that it is more efficient and effective. So in conclusion, the legal and policy frameworks on neurodiversity in Africa is still evolving, but they are really, really incomplete. At the global level, the CRPD provides a powerful rights-based foundation for understanding neurodivergent persons as holders of enforceable rights rather than passive beneficiaries of welfare. At the regional African level, the Disability Protocol and the African Charter supply a localized normative basis for inclusion. And countries such as Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Gambia now have disability statutes and institutions that can support inclusion. Yet, the central challenge is the gap between recognition. So, you recognize that there are neurodivergent individuals, but where is implementation? That's where the main gap is. So, neurodiversity continues to expose weaknesses in policy frameworks, enforcement, education design, labor inclusion, institutional awareness, and policy specificity. For that reason, the next phase of reform for Anglophone West Africa should not only focus on passing laws, and I already mentioned this, but operationalizing them, clarifying duties, who is responsible for what, which ministry, which department, which parastatal, resourcing these institutions, producing sector-specific guidance, collecting better data, and creating mechanisms through which neurodivergent persons can actually claim their rights. So I think at this point it's more about implementation and enforcement. So while policy briefs are crucial in that process because they help to convert the legal commitment into concrete reform agendas, neurodiversity in Africa requires urgent attention, research and policy development, raising awareness, creating inclusive education systems, implementing legal protections, and supporting inclusive workplaces are essential to ensure neurodivergent individuals can thrive. Organizations, governments, and communities must work together to provide safe spaces, early intervention, and acceptance so that they are not judged for thinking differently, but they are empowered to reach their full potential. So that's it. The next section will then be the the workshop. So thank you. I think this is a good place to bring paper to an end. We are going to have a workshop where we'll work on drafting a policy brief on policy frameworks in neurodiversity. So I think this will be done through the classroom platform, subject to Pascal's advice. Thank you. Hello, Pascal.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Wow, that's awesome. That is very, very amazing. Um, Thank you so much for this wonderful section, and we really, really appreciate you for making out the time to facilitate this section. And just before we call it a night, I'm sure that some of us in the meeting still have one or two questions which you can assist and answer for us. So, as usual, if you have any question, you can raise your hand, or you can drop a message in the comment section, and you can unmute yourself when you are asked to. So already I can see that Fatima's hand is up. So Fatima, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the insightful presentation. And my question is there any specific provision under the law that address the issue of neurodiversity? Because when you are making your discussions, you were talking about people with disability. That is an umbrella that talks about the whole people having disability. So is there any specific law that address the neurodiversity people? Because when we talk about people with disability, normally even those that have disability, there are some that are marginalized. Some that can be marginalized among them. For example, those that are suffering with neurodiversity. Most of them, it is not physical. It has to do with their brain. So for us to even detect them, one have to sometimes study them to understand them and know that yes, this person is suffering from neurodiversity. So thank you very much, and that's my question.
All right, thank you so much, Fatima. Thank you for your question, which is very apt. So yes, actually, I mean that's the part of the main problems. We do not have in Nigeria, we do not have a standalone neurodiversity law. Honestly, we do not. What happens, generally is that there's a disability law, a law that focuses on disability, and then under the definitions of disability, there is some sort of, should I use the word, a generic classification of neurodiverse conditions as one of the um, um, disability options, if that makes sense. So there's some sort of slight recognition, for neurodiversity, but for it to have like a whole full law by itself, no, not yet. So that's part of the issues, and I think I did mention that at some point in the course of my presentation, that we don't, even the UN convention, it's the convention on it's disability. They are talking about disability, not exactly neurodiversity. However, when you look at the definition and look at you will see neurodiversity there. So there is provision for it, but you coming out standalone in terms of laws in Nigeria right now, the answer is no. Where you will now see specific laws, or not laws, sorry, specific policies on neurodiversity is the corporate policies that we looked at. So the SAP, the IBM, those were made clearly for neurodiverse people, not just people with disabilities. They were made clearly for neurodiverse people because they already identified these are massive multinational corporate entities that are already identified. They have access to research and information, and they are quite enlightened. So they know that these people, they actually have a lot to also give. Their skills, once they are properly harnessed, they have the right support, right accommodation, right environment. These people will benefit us. So we want to include them. So those IBM, SAP, Microsoft, theirs is policies fixed directly on neurodiversity. But in terms of governments, and the rest like that, what they have most times is disability laws. I'm sure there will be countries that have specific neurodiversity laws, but in terms of, I focused on the global framework and then localized in Nigeria. So on those platforms, no. In Nigeria, no. It's just coming under the Disability Act, the African Charter on Human Rights. It just comes under definition of disability, not as standalone. So these are some of the things that we then need to change. Getting them to be more enlightened, having specific policies, to recognize these issues, because people do not even recognize them, that they exist. So for someone like me, for example, I think it was a movie that I watched that made me know about dyslexia. you know I can't remember the title of the movie. It was quite popular at the time, where the boy said, oh, the numbers are dancing, and the rest like that. And it was after that point that I realized that I had worked with someone that had it, because yeah, was normal, but we just certain time, like, what's confusing you is there. So it's not, the enlightenment is still not sufficient, even at the government level. So you do not have specific policies that deal with this thing on a broad scale. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Um. Okay. Is there another person that has questions to you? If you have question, you can indicate. But before then, Mrs. Asotie, uh, okay. Olubunmi Benjamin has a question, so you can unmute yourself. Olubunmi.
Hello, ma'am. Good evening, class. First, thank you so much for delivering such an insightful.
I can't hear you anymore. I don't know if it's just me.
A session concerning capacity. My question ability, and I know the skeleton, letting us know that this policy.
I think it's breaking from our end.
Is it better now?
Yes, it's better now. Hello.
Disability, which is where that is. I want to ask how, as an advocate or as a fellow, when we have to do advocacy around advocating for people with hidden disability, that's people with autism, ADHD, OCD, and the like, especially autism and ADHD, which is very much pronounced, but there is no recognition and there is no education and inclusion for them. In what ways within the framework can we couch our advocacy in a way that would will I say move the needle with the government at grassroots level, at maybe state level, or at a more broader level? How can we work our advocacy as a tool to ensure that these people are spoken for, to ensure that these people are included? For instance, there was a time that I was meant to travel with my son. We were given this option of a tag where I could explain to the ports airport staffs that my son has autism and he's under monitoring for ADHD. So we had that tag, and we also had like a lanyard. So immediately the airport staff saw us. They immediately asked, "What do we need? What do we need for us to have a good waiting period during our boarding session and stuff like that?" These little things creates a sort of ease, social ease for these people. My point is, how do we start our advocacy within the framework of these policies, in the sense that we can move the needle, or we can have these conversations to start up a fire about these conversations within the framework, using advocacy as a tool? Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry I missed like the beginning of your question, right? I think I have a fair idea of what the question is. So for me, right off the top of my head, I think using advocacy is for me, I think is you acting more like a pressure group at this point. And then beginning to get the buy-in of the policymakers and those that can actually make change happen. So I think those are some of the ways that you can do that. So in terms of engaging, for example, with the legislature, and that may just mean just getting someone in the house, depending either on the state level or the federal level, to understand what these issues are, have a buy-in, sponsoring a bill, to the house, just to create a level of awareness. Also, you may also need to collaborate. There are lots of NGOs and institutions, that are doing great work, but the efforts are sort of fragmented because everybody, you won't even know that maybe if for example I wasn't working in Punuka, I may not know about the foundation really. Excuse me. So coming together, also helps. There's this thing with collaborative efforts. And the good thing about this issue is that it's actually quite widespread. It's just that awareness is just coming up. It's just coming up. A lot of people, high profile people that I don't want to mention names, but you may be aware that one of the top popular billionaires in Nigeria has a neurodiverse son, and that's actually his only son. So the point is, it's quite widespread. It's something that touches them also, you know. And you could also go from there that you have experience with this thing, or at least this person that matters to you has experience in this thing, and something needs to be done. So it's going to take a lot of advocacy, acting as a pressure group, leveraging relationships, the same way we protest over fuel, we protest over this and that. So you protest to government, you write them, make presentation, press for bills, for laws to be passed, press for implementation, follow up on implementation, and the rest like that. So I think those are some of the things that we can do that will be helpful, because the truth is, almost everybody, in my opinion, I'm not sure, we're not very good with statistics here, but almost everybody knows someone that has a neurodiverse relative. So it's something that really should be recognized. But unfortunately, because of the kind of system that we run, it's like these issues have been relegated to the background. But it's a very valid thing that should be pushed for, and it's by acting essentially as a pressure group. I don't know if that answers your question, at least to a reasonable extent.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, for example, just in addition to what I've said, I'm not quite sure the example you gave about traveling with your son. I would be very impressed if it was in Nigeria. They suggested you having the tag and you got support. Um, you can confirm. Was it in Nigeria?
No, it wasn't. It was UK.
I know it cannot be us. So, but actually also presents you with an opportunity, really, because for me, I believe a lot in there might be restrictions, but I also believe a lot in forcing institutions to work. And in my experience, I feel that we as the people, we have become very complacent, and we are, by our complacency, adding to the problems. And what I mean is, with the kind of experience that you've had, you actually can write, you know, either to the Ministry of Health or even to the aviation authorities to say, oh, this is your experience in the UK, and they should consider doing something like that for Nigerian travelers. So maybe when they are buying their ticket, there could be a column for them to just state if they need accommodations for certain things, just the same way you could make requests, say for example, for a wheelchair. I think they're already used to the wheelchair one. So just the same way too, they should recognize that, okay, there are neurodiverse people that could be traveling, and there should be an opportunity for them to indicate, and then they have that special tag, maybe you put on their ticket or something, or just like you said, have a lanyard that they can identify, and then they train the custom officers, the airport officers, all the people that are there to also identify these things and give them reasonable accommodation. So it's something that you also can do something about, even as a citizen, right? Why not? You never know. Maybe the minister has a son or a relative that, and it be like, this is a good idea. So it's something that has not with not directly on neurodiversity, but just picking up is something that has helped me. I had There was a time some years back where I was living in Lagos. There was I don't even know what happened. What do we call this people? Loma, the people that come to pick up the trash, they just stopped coming. And it was one company that was handling like the entire area, which comprised of maybe 10 streets or more. And jokingly, like week 1, week 2, week 3, everywhere was overflowing with refuse. And I traveled, maybe like after the first week, I traveled, and then I came back and the area was horrible. All the houses, the refuse was, streaming in the drainage and everything. I just went outside, I took pictures. All the ministry that smelled like health in Lagos State, I wrote them an email. I wrote to Loma, I copied Ministry of Environment, I copied Ministry of Health. I wrote, and I attached the picture. And I complained very bitterly, because even if the contractor is having an issue, there has to be provision for alternative arrangement for them to pick up the trash, and how that could constitute a health hazard, and how they didn't want that to get into the media. No, beside I know anybody for media, and the rest like that, and there was no response in terms of my email, but they actually sent Loma truck to come and pick up the trash. They did. So, and they came, and slowly but surely, because the place was so full, it took them many trips to clear, all the streets and the rest like that. So if we had also just sat down, before you know, one kind of pandemic will now break out, and they will now start writing news that one thing. Me that I'm not easy politicians, but I will not come and suffer for what I don't know for. So I believe that you should also just engage, even on an individual level. You can just write and just request. Don't fight, don't insult, just write and request, and it can come true. So I hope that helps. Thank you, Pascal. I'm sorry I've taken your time.
Okay, it's okay. It's okay. All right. Thank you so much for your time, and we really, really appreciate it. So, I don't know. We'll be having the feedback session on Friday by 3 p.m. Will it be online or offline on the Google Classroom? So,
I think we can do online just so that.
okay, okay. Then concerning the post section tags, I don't know if you can give us a guidelines on what to do and stuff. It would be
Yeah,
quite
so that's the section that is on the screen. That's the section that is on the screen. So that's coming up with a fully policy framework. So we're trying to like draft a policy on neurodiversity. And so I just did like what's the segmentation and the rest like that. If you just scroll down, let me check my paper. So the workshop, so we just I don't know, maybe we'll do it on the class platform, or I don't know, you advise. So but essentially it's drafting a policy brief on policy frameworks on neurodiversity. So there will be an introduction to policy drafting, defining the policy problem. I talked about that earlier. Establishing the legal and institutional context. We already have that. Articulating what the policy objectives should be, and then developing the guiding principles, identifying stakeholders, and identifying and assigning responsibility. So under this one, we would have the stakeholder mapping, allocation of responsibilities, and the rest like that. Then formulating policy measures and recommendations, designing the implementation framework, ensuring compliance, monitoring, and enforcement, language, style, and drafting technique, achieving coherence and logical structure, and then the conclusion. So um, then there's like the templates for participants for them to now fill in the templates in coming up with the draft frameworks.
okay, okay. Again, would you want it to be done individually or as a group? Like we
We
have
can do
about
it
four
as
different groups.
okay. I think we can do it on a group level just so that it's more robust.
Okay. All right. Okay, no problem. So we're going to post the tags on the WhatsApp group and also on the Google Classroom. We all know our different groups, so you team up with your groups and you submit it before the end of tomorrow, which is Thursday, because the feedback session will be holding on Friday by 3 p.m. Possibly to be online or offline, but we're going to let you know before the time. Okay. So once again, thank you so much, Mrs. Asotie, for this wonderful section and for giving us your time, and we really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So I want us to go to the chat room and appreciate our facilitator for today. She did a very, very wonderful job on that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. Without no further questions, no further ado, we have to call it a day, right? So you go to your different groups and start working on the post section tags, which will be posted shortly this night. Okay, so that you can get the template overview on how to start writing as soon as possible. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your active participation. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and may we have a wonderful night's rest. Thank you and good night.